Okay, we have three more things to do. One is creating subplots, so to show several plots side by side, either as rows or as columns or as grids. Um, then I will briefly talk about scatter plots and finally about box plots. And I think then we have really a nice arsenal of tools to analyze our data. And again, we're just scratching the surface here, but I think this is a good collection of tools, especially for this particular data set that we're looking at. So subplots is I use it all the time. If you want to combine several plots and you don't want to do the alignment later on in your display program that you use, like PowerPoint or something like that. So um, you want to just have all the plots aligned directly. And for this, we can just say we want X number of rows and X number of columns. So in here, we have got one row and we show two plots. There's actually, you can make this a little bit more descriptive by calling the ncalls argument here, but that I'll show you that in the notebook later. So here then, the most important thing that changes here is that this axis object becomes a list now. So there's several axes here that we have to supply our plots to. There's the axis 0, which is the first one on the left, and then there's the axis 1, which is the second one on the right. And it will become more clear when we look at that um, in the notebook. And again, the fixed size you can adjust depending on how big you want your figure to be. And that's in inches, the measurements here. So yeah, let's go to the notebook. There's quite a lot of explanation here in the website, but I think it's probably best to go straight to the notebook. So let's do that. And so again, we are importing our data, and the first experiment here is simply to plot first your histogram as we did before. So we can do that very nicely. But now we want to show P53 and BRCA1 side by side. So how do we do that? We call now figure and axis because we have several axes. This doesn't matter what you call it here, but axis is clearer. That tells you, okay, we have more than one. And then we say PLT subplots, one row and two columns. And then we supply the first axis with the BRCA1 histogram. So that code is the same as before. And then the second axis with the P53 histogram. And then this PLT tight layout just makes everything nice and tidy. And then again, we don't really need this. And we'll have a look what happens when we get rid of the PLT tight layout. I don't think there's going to be a huge difference to see here. But I think it's distributed a little bit more clearly if we do it with PLT tight, and if your plot goes very is too narrow, then things will not look. So this is look right. So this is quite a useful command to order things properly. So this is a way of showing two plots in one go, and this can be very powerful if you want to really compare data and show how different trends occur in the data. We can also turn it around by just saying here one and two rows and one column. And now obviously we would probably want to change this to 5, turn that the width and the length around, and now we have it the other way around. But this data here, I would probably prefer to show it like that. And go back 12 and 5. Great. So this is very useful and it's worth exploring more. There's actually many different ways of doing this. When you only have one row, you don't need to show it, but you can say ncalls equals 2. That's another way of doing that. And in a way, I find this a little bit clearer because it tells me I have two columns here. and it works the same way. Or if I would want to have this in rows, then I would say n rows equals 2. I prefer personally this way of showing it because I think it's more readable, but you have to type a little bit more. Great, and this can be, you can supply you can supply as many as you like. There's also the option of making grids. So have a look through the notebook for all these different examples. So here's an example of a grid where you have to supply both the x and the y coordinates. And yeah, I think this is a really useful method. There's also ways of sharing now the x and the y axis, and there's a lot of examples and practice here in the notebook. So go through this, and this is another really useful skill of building more complicated compound figures that can be very powerful to compare data.